Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tom Lewis from TTEC Digital, and welcome to another LinkedIn Live session with founders and CEOs of amazing technology companies. Today, I'm pleased to have with me Mike Myer, who is the founder of Quiq. Now, Mike's got an impressive background as product and chief product officer and VP of engineering at Data as well as a long tenure at Right Now and a number of other companies that are all within the CX and telephony space. Now, Quiq is an interesting conversational AI platform. It's got some interesting contact center and email and other components to it as well. And as always, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about TTEC Digital or Quiq, but what's amazing about Mike's background is all of what it's taken to understand what customers are dealing with in terms of technology. And so I've got a whole bunch of questions. Mike, thank you for joining us today very much. Appreciate it.
It's an honor. I feel like a celebrity being here with you today.
I'll go on. And I assume that's Montana behind you. And I know you hail part-time in Montana, part-time on the East Coast. So, but let's get into it a little bit because I've got so many questions and so little time. I want to understand from your perspective what customers are addressing relative to conversational AI. And let's start with a really sort of beefy one around buy versus build. And more importantly, my question is, how should customers, clients of yours, think about where that yin yang is between what the buy versus the build conversation?
It's an interesting thing. I actually think of like the build versus buy as a false conundrum. So meaning, in other words, like it's not a binary choice, build versus buy. But a lot of organizations at the current moment, I think that they have a bunch of reasons, and we can talk about some of these as we go along, but they have a bunch of reasons for build and they have a bunch of reasons for buy, and there's internal strife. Maybe IT wants to build, but the business doesn't trust the IT organization to deliver. And so it's an interesting time. And, as I talk to brands, oftentimes they're like, "Oh, we're still trying to figure out whether we do what we're talking to vendors, but we're also doing proof of concepts internally. And we're trying to figure out like how we proceed and what the best strategy is."
Yeah, fair enough. And I know you guys work with a lot of retail clients and travel and hospitality, obviously a number of other ones. And the brand intimacy is a big part of this. And so I'm going to dive into intersection of something you just said, where you were talking about the technology group within a company, as well as what I'll just generically refer to as the business, and the challenge that each of them have trying to satisfy their internal stakeholders while achieving an external perspective. How do you, when you get into these conversations, where does it usually start? Is it in IT or is it in CX? And how do you get to the other one to get alignment?
Well, it's interesting. AI is so strategic and so important and so interesting to everybody involved that everybody wants to have a seat at the table. It used to be that the typical CX leader, and we oftentimes work with a final decision maker being the CX leader. It used to be the CX leader, for the most part, was like driving their business and the technology that they used, but they might have to get like some IT involvement in the final stages to like sign off on an implementation and time frame, et cetera. And it's actually changed a little bit, where I was at a conference about a month ago, and I asked people at the conference, in the past, you probably had control over your CX decisions. How has it changed? And about half the room raised their hands and said, well, actually now I need to get signed off by IT before I do anything with AI. Whereas in the past, I could just make a lot of my decisions once I got the IT support for the implementation. So the strategy for AI has become a much bigger decision across the organization, not just in the CX organization.
And is that an intersection with some sort of AI council as well that these companies have?
Every organization is a little bit different. There are some that set up, a very stringent hierarchy where there's like an AI governance or compliance team that needs to approve anything that's done with AI. Others have kind of delegated that, But even in those situations, I mean, frankly, and I don't blame them, there's a lot of IT organizations who are super excited because this is the newest thing that's come along along in quite a while, and they're super excited about doing things. So they're also, even in the case where the CX leader may have complete control over the decision, they're vying very hard to be able to actually be part of the delivery because they want to build and work in this technology.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think of myself, my degree is in computer science. I think of myself as a propeller head. I know you're deep in the tech as well. And so it is the most exciting thing. All right, so I'm going to take a little bit of a left turn so that we can get the audience geared into sort of how you apply your technology. So if you wouldn't mind, not necessarily talking about Quiq, but in terms of your customers, what's the like right up the middle of the fairway problem or pain that you solve for your end customer? And you can talk about either functionality or operations or what have you in terms of what you're doing for clients. So we can. Then I got a bunch of questions after that.
At the most basic level, and I think it's since the introduction of this large language models and generative AI, everybody recognized that customer service is one of the areas that have the most potential for AI to have an impact. And the holy grail of AI for customer experience is to be able to have very good AI that serves customers maybe more efficiently, faster, with better hours of service than a humans would be available. But that is the holy grail. The reality is there are still a lot of use cases and situations where human agents are preferable to AI, either because of the type of problem or maybe the type of data that's necessary to be accessed to solve the problem. And so in addition to just having the AI answer the customer directly, we can also use AI to make agents more efficient, help them do things in the back end, make additional decisions. We can use the AI also to help other systems. Maybe in a very simple case, maybe there's a call recording system that doesn't have a summarization capability, and you could apply the AI to the data from that system and summarize and store that somewhere else as well. So it's kind of like there's 3 touch points for AI. It's directly with customers, it's with your internal team to make them more efficient, and it's with your internal systems to make them more powerful.
Great. So I'm going to focus on the customer side of that equation, if you don't mind. And that's because I have this belief that customer experience, or at least customers' assessment of their interaction with brands, is actually going down in spite of the fact that the technology is advancing. And my hypothesis is simply that the technology is advancing, but not as fast as the expectations for that technology. When you have an 8th grader who can go on to ChatGPT and get answers to homework assignments, and then you go on to a retail site and say, "Where's my order?" and the thing says, "I don't know, would you like this or that?" And it's like, oh my goodness, this is such a far way. So I'm getting to my question. My question is around the customer touch point. And I know you have a number of examples live where you actually are using a generative AI response to customers, and not necessarily talking about that specifically, but rather how clients should think about that. Now, we talked about the AI Council. We talked about risks. Many people are aware of stories like the Air Canada story where the chatbot tried to give a refund and the company said, no, not so fast, and so forth. So help me understand what you would tell a client around, is it ready for prime time or not?
Well, first, I might digress for a little bit because the Air Canada thing constantly comes up. And it's ironic because the Air Canada situation occurred before generative AI was a thing. And so it was an AI error, but at the end of the day, they had the wrong knowledge. The knowledge was just wrong. It wasn't an AI error. They had wrong knowledge that was returned to the customer. And so it wasn't necessarily an AI issue, as more it was a data issue. But that I know there's lots of examples. There's other examples of hallucination, et cetera. In terms of readiness, what I tell clients is, and every organization is different. The use cases are different. The type of business, whether it's like, healthcare, where there might be lives at risk versus retail, where like an order at risk doesn't have the same type of a level of importance. Every organization needs to decide the right place to start to deploy AI. And from, as I work with companies, we're happy to start and follow their lead where they want to go. From my perspective, the capabilities of the AI are ready for prime time and direct customer interactions, again, for the right use case. And I think that your point initially about like the customer's perception of the experience is actually going down. I think that is the case because I think there's a lot of lousy AI implementations that currently exist in the marketplace. And so at the current moment, the quality of the implementations don't reflect the potential of the tool. And so I think that as people get more comfortable, as we are able to get additional data sources hooked up, I think we'll see the AI improve steadily over the next couple of years. And I'm going to say this, and there's going to be like a collective eye roll from everybody else on the other side watching this session. But in a couple of years, maybe it's not 2, maybe it's 5, but there's going to be a point in time where people are going to be like, where's the AI? I know I can get my answer there. I don't know that I'm going to be able to get a straight answer from, an unknown customer service rep on the other side of this call, because like customer service reps probably not trained that well, but the AI has been really like trained well. So I think that in a couple years, 5 years at the most, there's going to be a shift in customer perception away from like the AI is going to be bad service to the AI is going to be better service.
Yeah, it's interesting. So many different aspects to that, including the training one, because we have a lot of clients who are trying to stay ahead, because there's nothing more frustrating than calling into a contact center and realizing that you as the consumer know more about whatever the technology or process or product or whatever than the agent does, and that eludes back or goes back to the comments you were making around the agent interface with this technology and agent assist tools. So it's training and so forth. But so we got an inbound question that I'd like to pivot to for a second, and I'll come back to. CIOs are struggling with a lot of technology solution best of breed overload. And very often it's difficult to figure out what integrates with what. So do you have thoughts around from an integration standpoint, input, output, and maybe you could talk a little bit in this case around how you thought about that from engineering Quiq solutions?
I think at the end of the day, AI by itself, it doesn't have much value. Like AI with your business data that's where all the value is. And so oftentimes we'll get engaged with a company and they're like, oh, we need to go like collect our data and clean it up and like it'll be years before we could actually deploy AI because like we got to like go work on our data first. And that's true to a certain extent, but there must be some form of like reasonable data. And so oftentimes, my advice in this situation is don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Like there's value in your organization. You're receiving lots of different inquiries. There's value in automating just 1 or 2 of those that are the low-hanging fruit, and potentially the data can be collected in a reasonable way. And then send everything else to agents like you are today. Don't let we need to redesign our internal systems and our processes and put like an API gateway in place and et cetera. If you have one API and a bunch of knowledge and that covers 1 or 2 use cases, my advice is to get started, because one of the other things about, your comment about CIOs being inundated, AI is not going away. And so to the extent that you can get your hands dirty and start to use AI, don't assume that the implementation that you're going to do initially is going to be the perfect implementation, or it needs to last for the next 5 years. Assume that you're going to do an implementation that is live, not just a proof of concept, but is live. And based on that, learn, iterate, and fail forward. And so it's kind of like at this point in time, I wouldn't sit back. I'd be leaning in, even though things might not be perfect on the other side. You just have to be better than what your lowest paid agent can currently do today.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's the same. I love that advice. your opportunity cost is growing every day that you wait, and a lot of organizations are fairly bureaucratic and slow in this regard. And so as soon as they've made a decision, the technology landscape might also change. And so you can sort of grow and learn with the technology as it goes along. When you're thinking about that, I'll call it a stepwise approach, or the idea of get going on what you can going. How do you talk to the client about building the ROI for either the end state or the middle state or what have you? And the hypothesis in here is it ultimately cheaper, or is it just that it's fewer humans and less errors and better CX, or is it actually cheaper?
In general, I can't think of a use case or a business case that we were involved with that it wasn't cheaper. And so, you have to look at, maybe not look at it in the 12-month time frame, but in the 24-month time frame, because there's some upfront costs associated with implementing AI. But we always are able to generate a business case that has multiple, probably more like 4 to 6 and sometimes higher return on an investment from doing this. But I don't think that's necessarily the only reason to do it. I mean, that could be part of the financial justification, but there could be other business reasons. One of the common ones that we could run across is, unless you're a very large organization, you probably are not staffed in the contact center 24/7, 7 days a week. And because it's just super expensive, especially if you support multiple languages and regions, and like the matrix of staffing involved in running a contact center 7 days a week, 24 hours a day is just super complicated. And so maybe part of the reason to do AI initially is to just provide something in an off hours state that's much better than like call us in the morning. So it doesn't have to be like necessarily financially driven. There can be other customer experience reasons. And hours of service happens to be one that we run across pretty regularly as a high value, like CSAT reduction as well, increase as well.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because while it helps the consumer interface when they want to, if it increases the chances that they actually get a complete answer, then they simultaneously don't generate that contact later in the day.
And so the other one is, you can deploy AI for different reasons. Everything that we've talked about so far is kind of assumed that like an inbound inquiry and you're trying to resolve issues for existing customers. But they're also in the purchase journey while you're looking at a product. If you have questions about the product and you can get a helpful assistant to answer questions like, I'm looking at a sofa, what's the frame made out of? What's the dimensions of the piece of furniture? That type of stuff. And that information might be on the page somewhere, but people don't read through all the paragraphs, and especially on the pages arranged with like those expanding sections, and you got to like click around to try to like find the answer. It's not just about saving money; it's also about driving additional cost. At the end of the day, what's AI good for? In this generation of generative AI, it can interact with natural language, and so it can answer questions, and those questions can occur in a bunch of different contexts.
So, excuse me. So I've got my last question for you, and it's a little bit of a brain teaser. My theory is that if you make contacting a brand effortless and truly effortless through technology, that consumers will interact more, not less, with that brand. And the actual contact rates, you used a very good example, which is, what's the frame made out of on the sofa or whatever? And my I don't know that I would bother picking up the phone or calling about that. But the idea that I would interact with self-service to do that, sure. And by the way, that might generate other things, other purchases, other conversations. And so what's your thought? It creates more or less interaction with the brand?
It creates more interaction, but isn't that a good thing?
I hope so. As long as it's not all complaints management, I suppose.
Well, I mean, you think about the physical retail experience. It used to be you were in a store and the store's associate's job was not to leave you alone and hope that you don't ask any questions. But the store associate's job was like to come over and help you. Like, can I help you find something? Do you have any questions? Like,
Hover just right.
Yes, exactly. So the concept of like, oh my gosh, this is going to increase our contact rate. Well, you need to be able to efficiently respond to those. Overall, that's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Mike, we've come to the end of our discussion today. I want to thank you again for the thoughtful discussion. And if anybody's got any questions for Mike around Quiq, obviously you can reach out to either of us if you got any questions around how to make those business cases and processes work. The other thing I'd point out is if you go to the Quiq website, up at the top, there's an opportunity to download a Forrester article, which is very interesting around conversational AI. And so that might be a good way to get acclimated with this entire topic as well as with Quiq. So with that, Mike, thank you again and have a fantastic rest of your week.
Thank you. It's been a great conversation.